Hello guys, it's Ryan here, the Hobbies of Man. Once again, and today we're doing another episode of the Sword and Sorcery Book Club. Today, we're looking at the Savage Sword of Conan Reforged, issue 1, out of an unknown number of issues. I assume it's going to be like 12, 13, maybe 14 or 15, something like that. This is a interesting repackaging type of deal. It's collecting stories that are adaptations of the original Howard stories for Conan specifically. I don't know if they're going to continue on with other adaptations, but this is supposed to at least collect like the 26 or so, I think, different Conan stories and their adaptations from the earlier run of the Savage Sword of Conan. So this is interesting. I don't necessarily know if this is a book that the vast majority of people will need to buy. I recommend you do, but I think it's a very case-by-case kind of basis, right? So the other interesting aspect of this is that the stories have been recolored as a way to incentivize buyers, I assume. Like, the Savage Sword of Conan was in black and white. These have been rescanned, touched up, I assume, and then colored by a Italian coloring group, CFB Comics, I think is what they're called, or GFB or something like that. And this book, to me, is about an 8 out of 10. I think it's quite enjoyable. I liked it. I will probably buy more of these. Actually, I think I will buy more of these, but I'm not sure that it's something I can recommend to everyone. And the reason for that is that if you're a diehard Conan comic book fan, you probably already have these stories in some way. You probably have them in the omnibus editions, and there's really no point in double or triple dipping if you already have that, because a lot of you might not like the colors and the way that they're done. If you're a newer fan like me, and you don't really want to splurge on those giant omnibuses, this is definitely something that you should buy. And that's really what I'm going for here. That's why I'm buying it, and that's why I will continue to buy it, because these are the original stories collected and slightly reworked, right, with that recoloring. And I can buy them for relatively less than it would cost me to get those omnibuses, right? In terms of space, in terms of cost, in terms of tracking them down, this is a lot easier. And these are really the stories that I'm most interested in owning, because they're the ones that are written by Robert E. Howard and then directly adapted, right? And this is well done. I liked it. There's 3 things that are collected here. There's the Frost Giant's Daughter, there's a poem with illustrations, and then there is a edition of the Tower of the Elephant. For me, it's well done, except for the poem. I think that there could have been some work done with the poem to make it a bit more enjoyable to read. Better than it would have been, just in black and white. And I don't think that they did that well with that. But everything else is perfect, in my opinion. I really, really liked it. And there's a few other things that I would have liked for this story to have, or for this book to have, and that is some work, some behind-the-scenes work, explaining how these stories came to be, right? Some information from Roy Thomas, or windsor-smith, or Buscema, talking about the process behind these stories being made. I think that would have been valuable. That would have been a nice addition to this. Or maybe an essay from Jeff Shanks telling us about some of the work that went into these stories to get to learn a little bit more about them. I think that would have been valuable. I don't necessarily think it would have been all that costly to add, and it would have given me a little bit more value for my money, because this is a $10 book. And I think it's fairly justified. The recoloring cost a bit. I'm sure they have to give some royalties to a few of the creators here. And this is much better paper stock quality than what we see in the normal Savage Sword. So the $3 price hike is understandable, but not quite felt in terms of the final product. I think that, again, my major issue that I have is that this is such a thin cardstock for the cover. And it ends up feeling like this book is not a $10 book, if that makes sense. It doesn't, like it's a nice material, but it's too thin. And so there's no, what's it called? Structure to the book. It feels very flimsy. And when I pay $10 for something, I don't want it to feel flimsy. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the middle story, the poem, I don't think was colored all that well. And I would have liked some work done to make it better, right? So here is the opening page. It's a nice pinup. I really like it. I think it looks really awesome. Conan fighting a normal looking dragon instead of what would actually be a lore accurate dragon, which would be a dinosaur. And then we have this beautiful color page here and the table of contents with a great scene picked out of the Frostgiant's Daughter. And you have the table of contents. And in this case, I think the pages are numbered, so the table of contents having numbers actually is valuable. However, I do think that there could have been some editing work done here to make this better, because these letters and numbers are too close together. This actually ends up feeling like almost a printing issue. So that or should have started over here, and there should have been less dots there. I think that would have just been better in my opinion. Otherwise, everything else seems quite good here in this page. And then we have the Median Chronicle in color, which is nice, and this nice map. It's based on Robert E. Howard's map, so it's a bit different from what we are used to getting from the other current Conan things, but it's not so different that it's weird, right? It's nice. I like that it's colored differently, although I'm not really sure why different colors are picked for different areas. I assume that there's some sort of underlying grouping to them, but I don't see a key to it, so I'm not really sure. I assume this is all of the barbarians. This is all of the civilized people. These are all the, in-betweeners, and then, of course, the Black Kingdoms down here. And then we have the start off here of the story, The Frostgiant's Daughter by Robert E. Howard, and, of course, some information there about, the story, and it looks really nice. I actually love the coloring here. It doesn't look bad. It looks very, very typical of what you would expect from this time period that the stories come from. It looks quite nice. I like it a lot. And this story is a bit broader than the actual original story, and some of the choices made in terms of how the characters are depicted maybe doesn't quite, match with some of the narration here. Like, these characters are supposed to be carved of ice, right? And so they look like normal people. That doesn't really jive with me. I do like the interpretation of them being blue, like the Frost Giants in Marvel Comics or the Marvel movies, a bit more. But at the same time, it's fine because they represent the Vanir and the Aesir very, very well with their actual human-like coloring, right? So I like that. I think that that's fine. But maybe a bluish toned hue to their bodies would have been better. Otherwise, everything here looks good. The strange witch lights in the sky, I think, should have been the Aurora Borealis, but in fact, they chose this interesting, set of, fireball things. And then the story ends here quite nicely, very similar to the actual story. We have an essay here by Patrick Searcher about his love for Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that. And I actually really enjoyed this. I think it was a good read. But I would have also liked to see some work done explaining to us how this story came to be, what Roy Thomas was thinking when he was doing it, and maybe some of the work by the colorists, like why they picked certain colors. I think that sort of stuff, that behind the scenes type information, would have been quite valuable in something like this, because it would have made it a bit better in terms of appeal to other people, right? And then here we have the poem. This is a poem about Samaria. And generally, I do like the colors here. I enjoy them, but I do think that there is one problem with this. First of all, I appreciate that they used black for most of it, and they tried to highlight the colors in the background so that the text would be visible. But then in stuff like this, it's basically almost non-existent. And so I think that the colors for the letters should have been white and not black. And I don't know why that work wasn't done, or why anyone thought that this was acceptable. You can barely read what's going on there, right? And some of the divisions here for some of this work don't feel like they're correct. Like if you see here, there's this line that you see across this that almost kind of goes into the next panel. And so it looks like this rock was placed on top of the two panels, and it doesn't work because it makes this like, it breaks the illusion, and also the fact that the text goes across both panels makes it like kind of annoying looking, right? I don't know. I don't know how to explain how this doesn't work for me, but basically the stick on the P is on the same parallel as the line that divides the two, and so it kind of feels like it gets lost there, and I don't appreciate that. I think it's kind of bad. But the coloring work for the backgrounds is phenomenal. I love it. It looks great. I feel like they were almost to perfection and they didn't manage to land it. Also, maybe it's because this coloring looks a bit digital, but some of the ways in which Conan is colored don't really work for me that well either. And also these weird panel line divisions look really odd, particularly this one here, where you have color dividing this panel across these two, but then you have an actual line that you can just barely see down there that doesn't match where the color of this panel ends. And so I don't like that either. I think that they could have done something different with that. So I don't know. There's some issues that I have with this particularly, which is a shame because this is the one that was done by João Canolo, who is a current colorist for the Titan Comics run. And so it almost feels like he got a job that he wasn't really prepared for, and that doesn't bode well for some of this work, right? But overall, it's fine. That's not really what the story or what the reason for picking this book up is. So it's fine that it's not as good, but if I pay $10 for something, I want it to be as good as possible, right? And then we have the Tower of the Elephant, and this one is much, much better. I really like it. It looks really nice. The colors are good. The fact that there's plenty of panel division and it's clear and it's easy works. And also the colors of the letters are different depending on who's talking and the narration and all this type of stuff. And the color changes actually make it easier to read the story, so I like that. I think that that's well done. The colors here look quite good. The way the characters are depicted is nice. They don't really have a lot of shading onto them, but they have enough that it gives them more life without kind of looking like a modern coloring style, if that makes sense. And generally, it's quite good. I do like it. Yacht Kosha here looks quite good. I like it. And then the story ends quite simply, very similarly to the actual Tower of the Elephant. And then we have another pinup here at the end, which looks really, really great. Although I do think the pinups should have information about who did them. I don't see that being represented anywhere, although I could have missed it. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see it anywhere. I don't see the credit going to anyone on the contents page. So I would have liked that to be there. I think it makes sense to do that. And I also don't understand what these lines are. Maybe they're from the original printing of it. I'm not really sure. There is one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and it's this. This is a subscription offer page, which is another pinup. It's in the middle of the story, which is a bit annoying. But at the same time, I assume that this was also originally there. And what they did here is give us this modern, QR code scan thing instead of what was originally written here, in order to give us a something similar without it being just a weird ad that they had to leave in, right? So I appreciate that. However, this looks kind of weird because you can tell that they kind of just like scribbled it in, which maybe adds to the feeling of the story, but or to the feeling of the book. But in my case, it makes it look like it was poorly done. Like they didn't bother to give this the attention it deserved, because it pretty simply would be easy to just make another square and then color that square the same color as the background and then just place that on top instead of having to do this like weird like scribble kind of looking thing that they did here, right? So 8 out of 10 for me. I think it's worth buying if you're not someone that wants to invest in those massive omnibuses and you still want to collect some of these valuable, top tier stories, but it is not necessarily the thing that you need to buy if you already have those or you have some other collected edition of the episode of Conan. So, your mileage may vary there. For me, as a newer fan, this is definitely worth the buy. I have some problems with it, but the problems are not so significant that I will stop buying it. I do hope that they do better, because this is the first issue. This is what gives you the first impression. It has to be the best issue for a while. And I think that they didn't quite hit the mark, at making sure that this is the best product they could give us. And so that's a bit of a shame, but maybe I'm more critical than the vast majority of people. So that's understandable, if you disagree with me on that. But overall, 8 out of 10 for this. It's more or less worth the $9 or $10 that I paid for it. I don't necessarily think that you're missing out if you're a super fan that already has collected this. But if you're a newer fan, I do think that it would be to your interest to buy this, right? So there we go. Also, this awesome cover by Del Torre really does work very, very nicely. So, there is at least some nice new artwork that you're getting from the story. So, yeah, there you go. Those are my thoughts on this episode of Conan Reforged. Let me know what you think down below. Did you buy it? Are you not buying it? Were you waiting to see a review before deciding? Let me know that in the comments. And thank you guys very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And see you guys next time.